Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Herbie Hertilian. I'm currently a senior at Valencia College, set to graduate in May of 2025 with a Bachelor's of Applied Science in Computing Technology and Software Development. For this semester, I'm actually taking a seminar in advanced software dev. And for this presentation, I'll be pretty much talking about my experience with the OpenStackHPC Magnum project that was hosted by STIC. So here's the title. I did the OpenStack mentorship. That's my name professionally. You know. So I'm just going to quickly take you through the agenda today. So here's a quick overview of what we'll be covering today. First, I'll explain like the SSH key and the setup for the connections. Then I'll also pretty much walk you through some of the things that I've tested with the environment to ensure that everything was working as expected. Um, After that, I'm pretty much gonna take you through setting up my OpenDev account and how I committed changes to the Magnum project. And we'll also pretty much talk about briefly some of the unit testing tools that I used, like unit test, tester, and Tox. And finally, I'll show you some examples of how we improved the test coverage for one of Magnum's key classes. So what is an SSH key? So to start off, one of the steps to contributing to OpenDev is setting up an SSH key for authentication. So SSH key is just a way to secure your login without having to consistently input your password. So it's especially helpful when you're interacting with like Git or Git services. So pretty much I generated a RSA SSH key using the SSH keygen command, which added the private key SSH agent and uploaded a public key to my OpenDev account. And this pretty much ensures that I can securely connect to the OpenDev account without constantly re-entering my password and whatnot. So the next slide pretty much shows you an example of me setting up my SSH key in my personal environment. So at the moment, I'm recording this on my Windows device, but for the entirety of the project, I actually worked on a MacBook. So I can't physically demonstrate some things that I'm going to show you because of the style of this machine, but I will actually show you some screenshots of the different tests that I ran on my MacBook the machine that shows you pretty much the process that I took. But so far, this is what you'll see when you are setting up your SSH key in the Windows or MacBook command line. And this is what the results will pretty much look like right here on the right hand side of the screenshot. The next thing we pretty much did was testing the IPv environment. So pretty much this ensures that your environment is correctly configured to connect with the remote services. It verifies connectivity, especially when interacting with Git and Git services, which is I mentioned earlier. Testing with the SSH key. Um, And so uh, a lot of people can simply just run the SSH-T command to check their connection. And the expected result would is obviously, hopefully, it will tell you to have successful authenticated without being granted shells access. But that's like the standard response or whatnot. For me, I actually went to a website that Stick gave us and it tested my IPv6 connectivity. And the screenshot here to my right is the results of my test, pretty much ensuring that I was up and running successfully and that, you know, I had the right authentication. So the next we had to create and set up an open dev account. This is pretty much needed in order to actually make contributions to the Magnum project. So first off, here to the right on the top right corner, you'll see the screenshot of the successful creation of my Ubuntu account, which allows me to have access to the Open Dev community. Obviously, in order for you to do that, you'll have to sign the individual contributors license agreement, and this pretty much gives you full access to the website. It pretty much Open Dev provides a centralized place to manage all of the contributions, and it's pretty much required for reviewing and submitting patches. After signing up and leaking my GitHub account, I pretty much signed, like I said, the individual contributors license agreement, which is necessary to start contributing. And once my account was set up, I could easily start, accessing the repositories and begin working on the Magnum project. So the next thing we're going to talk about is like making commits to the OpenDev project. So the next thing I did was find a location where I wanted to store the project on my working MacBook machine. And then I just started cloning the repository onto my local machine. So I worked on adding unit tests. So that's this top part, which is cloning the repository, getting the actual project onto your machine to set up so you can actually start working on it. And then after you make your changes, obviously you're gonna use some the necessary git commands like git add, git commit, dash m. This is in your add your commit messages or whatnot, and to push it up to the repository. Um, but after cloning the Magnum repository to my local machine, I pretty much worked on adding unit tests to improve the code coverage. So for example, I added a test to the HTTP not acceptable API version class to cover cases where the API version was just not was unsupported. And after making the changes, I staged them using git add dot and committed them with a message that described the changes that I did. So here you can see that I put a commit message with added the unit test for HTTP not acceptable API version, which I just mentioned. Um, And then once the changes were ready, I pushed them to the OpenDev using git review command. This queues them up to be ready to be reviewed by the community, the Magnum community. So next, preparing for a submission. Setting up Git review, I had to install Git review, which is I had to use the sudo apt-get install Git review. And this, the setup pretty much ensures that the proper remote is set for OpenDev. Git remote add review, the SSH key, git add review OpenDev. This is the pretty much the link. Um, After submitting, you submit the patch, you push the changes to the OpenDev for review. Git review is the command. Everyone would then be able to see it from the thing. Again, so before making my changes, I needed to set up the Git review, which is a tool that helps automate the submission process to OpenDev, which is the website that I had showing you a screenshot of earlier. So it's easy to install and configure, but once I had it set up, I could push my changes directly to the review system. This process pretty much streamlined, and once the changes are submitted, they're reviewed by other contributors, and I can receive their feedback for any necessary improvements. Tools that were used for unit testing. Obviously, I mentioned earlier that we were using unit tester, and Tox. Um, So as part of the project, I focused heavily on unit testing to ensure the code that was basically reliable and maintainable. I used a built-in Python unit test framework, which is simple but effective for writing test cases. For managing and running tests, I also use Tester, which is a test runner that organizes and executes the tests. Finally, Tox pretty much allowed me to automate the testing across multiple Python environments to ensure that the code was running consistently across different systems. And these tools were definitely crucial in improving the overall quality of the project. So yeah, built-in Python testing. Unit test is built-in Python testing framework to create and execute test cases. It pretty much supports the assertion to validate the results. Tester is the test runner for managing and running the test, and it helps organize and execute large sets of tests. And Tox automates the testing across multiple environments. Um, and then it ensures the consistency in testing environments, pretty much. So next, we're going to take you through understanding unit test in Magnum. So in the Magnum project, we pretty much identified some areas where unit test coverage was lacking, particularly in the HTTP not acceptable API version function. So I wrote the test to cover the edge cases, ensuring that any unsupported API versions would be handled correctly. The test case that I added checks the behavior when a version number outside the acceptable range is passed in the request headers. And this kind of testing is essential to ensure that the code functions as expected, even in unexpected situations or scenarios. So the Magnum OpenStack is a project where where we were contributing tests and we wrote unit tests to increase test coverage, specifically, like I said, to the HTTP not acceptable version function in the HTTP underscore error.py class. So this is an example of the test cases that we're adding and improving the test coverage. So, like I said, I did most of the work throughout the entirety of the mentorship on my MacBook, and I'm not using my MacBook at the moment. But these three screenshots, um, are definitely screenshots that were taken after running some of the commands that were used to test in my environment, my MacBook environment, and like I said, one of the main goals of this project was to improve the test coverage for the Magic project. I ran coverage report, which highlighted the areas that were like under under tested. Um, and after identifying these gaps, I added several tests to the HTTP not acceptable API version class, ensuring that the edge cases were covered. I used Tox to run the test in different environments and the coverage to check the results. The extra effort will pretty much help ensure that the Magnum project is more robust and likely to encounter bugs in production. So the coverage report we ran on the Magnum to identify, like I said, areas where we lacked coverage. Again, in the HTTP not acceptable API version, it was under tested. So we used the Tox E-Pi3, which was ran in my environment, and then Tox E-cover to check the test coverage after editing the results. And the screenshots pretty much show you the results of my successful testing in my MacBook environment. So review, process, and submission. Okay. So after submitting via Git review, the patch is listed for review on the OpenDev website, like I mentioned earlier. So the system is essentially for full collaboration development because it allows other developers to review my code and provide feedback and either suggest improvements or just take the code that I provided. The community's input is very invaluable and it pretty much ensures the highest quality of the code is being contributed. And once the code is approved, it'll be merged to the main project. Um, so my changes, worst days, this is the link if you ever want to open up my presentation and click on it. But you don't need to because I include the screenshots here to my left. Here you can see the contributions that I made. These are both the same on one page. I just couldn't include everything on one screenshot. I just added two screenshots. But here you can see that this was the commit that I pushed up to the OpenDev. And here I this is like I said the little comment that I added to pretty much describe the changes I made. I added the different test units. I added unit tests to improve the code coverage to better cover the HTTP non-acceptable API version class. And it was co-authored by Jason Flores, which is my classmate. After putting this up, again, I said you are pushing this to be reviewed by the OpenDev community, and whether or not it's done, they can add or merge it to the main project. Once it was reviewed, we did get a review. So here's my code review. It was verified by by somebody, and at the same token, I got a code review that pretty much said the patch looks right overall, but they wanted me to add some better explanations and reasonings to the chains in the base/test.root class, and then they'll merge it. So that's just pretty much an example of being able to contribute to the OpenDev and the Magnum project, and then having someone review and see your code. Also offering different suggestions or feedback within the code as well. So that's how pretty much the OpenDev community works. So areas for improvement, pretty much. I feel like we could have added more tests to increase the test coverage in key classes to, pretty much focus on improving the coverage. I just feel like the reasoning behind that is because it will improve the reliability and stability of the project and ensure that all critical components are thoroughly tested. And some of the technical challenges that I endured during this mentorship was first I had to learn the Linux commands. It was a significant hurdle since I was new to the environment and I had to adapt to the commands and the configurations. Remember, I told you that my primary machine is my Windows machine, so learning and having to migrate to the MacBook for the duration of this mentorship was That was a little bit of a challenge, pushed me out of my comfort zone, but it was great for learning purposes. Um, Understanding Python unit testing frameworks was new for me, well, for sure, because I spent a lot of time learning Java-based projects for my other classes. So it took a time to definitely grasp and understand the different practices for writing efficient tests, but Stick definitely helped us out with that. And lastly but not least, the most one of the most challenging things was definitely setting up the open dev environment because there was a whole lot of steps that I had to do. There was a whole lot of accounts that I had to create and link GitHubs and a whole lot of stuff. And integrating with Garrett required several adjustments to my local environment that I wasn't prepared to do because I didn't understand it. Um, Especially when initially I had problems with my SSH key in my Windows environment because it kept asking me for a password that I didn't know or maybe I had entered and didn't remember it or whatnot. And then understanding the version control workflows. So everything was pretty much new to me and a learning experience throughout the entirety of the mentorship project. But I definitely appreciate, sticking the OpenStack HPC project for allowing me to be tucked under their wing and learning and growing as a developer under them. Some successes and disappointments. Like I said, the disappointment was not being able to have this up and running on my Windows, but the successful part was I had a MacBook, another environment to try out, which is good. I do heavily suggest having multiple different types of environments so that you'll be able to be versatile in the field. But it was definitely rewarding to be able to set up the SSH key and connect to the OpenDev with my MacBook, even though I failed to do it on my PC. And definitely successfully contributing to the Open Magic project by adding unit tests, which was a key milestone in my learning experience. Again, disappointments was not being able to try and successfully get this running on my Windows machine. Um, and definitely some of the earlier tests that I had wrote had to be rewritten due to lack of coverage in certain code paths. But this led to better understanding in the code coverage in the long run. Project do over. What would I do differently if I could do the project over? I would definitely focus on sitting and understanding more of the Python testing, as well as more thorough understanding of the frameworks. I didn't really understand Python. Again, this was new to me, and I had to learn throughout the majority of the mentorship. But if I could do it differently, I would actually have learned a little bit more Python before trying and starting the mentorship. Had I known what I was going to get into, because this would have definitely given me deeper understanding of the unit test principles. I wouldn't have had to revisit my code so many times. So that's definitely what I would do over. It's definitely taking time to, if I had the time, but we really had to jump into everything right away. But if I had the time, I would sit into coding, and understanding the principles of unit testing in Python. And in conclusion, I've covered the entire process throughout the entirety of my mentorship, pretty much starting from setting up my SSH key in my working environment and testing the environment to making sure that everything was compatible. I even talked about committing changes to the open dev and improving the unit test coverage in the Magnum project. The goal again was not only to ensure and make sure that the environment was set up correctly, but also to contribute valuable code uh, improvements. By enhancing the test coverage, I pretty much made the Magnum project a little bit more stable and a little bit more reliable for future contributions. And moving forward, I'll continue, improving the test coverage and engaging with the community for feedback. So thank you for your time, HPC, OpenStack, and Stig for allowing us to learn under your mentorship. I was really excited and happy to learn and grow from the experiences that I've shared with you guys. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys might have about my project. So please feel free to reach out and thank you.